The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in elegant cream paper with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of James Wilson and Sarah Matthews. I traced my fingers over the embossed letters, a bitter smile playing on my lips. My brother, the golden child, was finally getting married. James had always been our parents' pride and joy, the successful corporate lawyer who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was Julia, the family disappointment who wasted her inheritance on buying an old, run-down estate instead of following a traditional career path. Julia, darling. My mother's voice chirped through the phone that evening. You got the invitation, right? Now about the seating arrangements. She paused, and I could practically hear her crafting her next words carefully. You understand that all the important guests, James's law firm partners, Sarah's family, they need to be seated in the main hall. I gripped my phone tighter. And where exactly am I being seated, Mom? Well, another pause. The kitchen area has some lovely service tables. It's quite cozy, really. And you'll be able to help if anything goes wrong with the catering. My blood ran cold. The kitchen. They were seating me, their own daughter, in the kitchen of my own venue. Yes, my venue. 2 years ago, I'd purchased Riverside Manor, a beautiful but neglected historic estate. Everyone had called me crazy. What does Julia know about running a venue? They'd whispered. She's throwing away her future. What they didn't know was that I'd spent those 2 years transforming Riverside Manor into the most exclusive wedding venue in the city. But I'd kept my ownership quiet, operating through a management company. As far as my family knew, I'd just helped book the venue for James's wedding as a sister's gesture. That's fine, Mom, I said quietly. Whatever makes James happy. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear. I'd made sure every detail was perfect, from the crystal chandeliers to the fresh roses in the garden. Not for James, but because Riverside Manor's reputation meant everything to me. I arrived early wearing a simple blue dress. The wedding planner, Maria, who knew my true identity, shot me a concerned look as I walked past. Ms. Wilson, are you sure about Dash? I cut her off with a small shake of my head. Just treat me like any other guest today, Maria. As guests began arriving, I watched from the shadows. James and his groomsmen strutted around like they owned the place. My parents fluttered from group to group, proudly introducing James's law firm colleagues. Then I saw him, Richard Hammond, the managing partner of James's firm, a man known for his ruthless business acumen. I was just about to head to my assigned seat when James spotted me. His smile was all teeth as he walked over, champagne glass in hand. Julia. Found your seat yet? Just heading there now, I replied softly. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. The kitchen is where you belong, sis. Among the help. At least you'll be useful there. He smirked, straightening his expensive tie. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly. But before I could respond, a voice cut through the tension. Ms. Wilson. It was Richard Hammond, moving toward us with purpose. James's chest puffed up, clearly assuming his boss was addressing him. But Richard walked right past him, stopping in front of me. Ma'am, I didn't know you owned this venue, he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet foyer. I've been trying to schedule a meeting with you for months. Your work with Riverside Manor is incredible. The silence that followed was deafening. James's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Behind him, my parents had gone pale, and the whispers began to spread through the gathering crowd. I smiled, finally letting my mask fall. Mr. Hammond, welcome to Riverside Manor. I hope you're enjoying my establishment. And that was just the beginning of what would become the most memorable wedding my venue had ever hosted, though not for the reasons my brother had planned. The next few moments felt like a scene from a movie playing in slow motion. James's face had transformed from smug superiority to shocked disbelief, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My mother clutched my father's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive suit. You own this place? James finally managed to stammer. Richard Hammond was still standing beside me, either oblivious to or enjoying the family drama unfolding. Own it? Ms. Wilson has turned Riverside Manor into the most sought-after venue in 3 states. We've been trying to book our firm's annual gala here for months, but there's a 2-year waiting list. I maintained my professional smile, though inside I was savoring every second. Actually, Mr. Hammond, Why don't we step into my office later to discuss your gala? I might be able to find an opening. That would be wonderful, he beamed, completely missing James's face turning an interesting shade of purple. My mother suddenly rushed forward, her society smile firmly in place. Julia, darling, why didn't you tell us? We had no idea. The kitchen seating, we would never. Really, Mom? I cut her off softly. You never asked. Not once in 2 years did you ask what I was doing with my life. You were too busy bragging about James's law career. But my father stepped forward, his business mind clearly recalculating everything he thought he knew. This place must be worth $7 million at last valuation, I finished for him. Plus the $3 million in annual revenue. Would you like to see the books, Dad? I know how much you love numbers. The whispers around us grew louder. James's bride Sarah had appeared, her white dress a stark contrast to her reddening face. James, she hissed, you said this venue was a favor from your unsuccessful sister. I couldn't help but laugh. Oh, it was a favor, all right. I gave you a 50% discount. Though given the current seating arrangements, perhaps I should review that. You can't. James started, but Richard Hammond cut him off. Speaking of seating, I noticed I'm at table 12. Rather far from the main action, Richard mused. Perhaps, Ms. Wilson, you'd join me at my table? I'd love to discuss your business model. Before I could respond, Maria, my event manager, appeared with an iPad. Ms. Wilson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation with the catering payment. James's face went from purple to white. Sarah's father had promised to pay for the catering, but I knew he'd been having financial troubles. The payment was declined, Maria continued, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Should we proceed with service? I could have ended it all right there. One word from me and the entire wedding would grind to a halt. No food, no service, no perfect society wedding. James knew it too, I could see it in his eyes. For the first time in our lives he was at my mercy. The silence stretched out, heavy with anticipation. Every eye in the foyer was on me, waiting to see what the owner of Riverside Manor would do about her own brother's wedding catering crisis. I smiled, reaching into my clutch to pull out my business credit card. Charge it to the house account, Maria. Consider it my wedding gift. I turned to James and Sarah, my voice carrying clearly. After all, family belongs in the kitchen, right, brother? The look on James's face was worth every penny of the catering bill. But the day was far from over, and I hadn't even shown them the renovation plans for the kitchen yet. Richard Hammond chuckled beside me, clearly enjoying the show. I think, he said loudly, we need to discuss moving some of our firm's accounts to Ms. Wilson's management company. Clearly, the law firm has been working with the wrong Wilson. And that's when James's perfect world truly began to crumble. The wedding reception was a masterclass in elegant revenge. I sat at the head table, Richard Hammond had insisted, while James and Sarah had to watch their boss spend the entire evening discussing business opportunities with his new favorite Wilson. Your brother never mentioned your business acumen, Richard commented, loud enough for James to hear. Though I suppose working in corporate law isn't quite the same as building a multimillion-dollar company from the ground up. Each compliment was a dagger, each business discussion a twist of the knife. James kept drinking, his face growing redder with each glass of the expensive champagne I'd provided. Sarah spent the evening alternating between forced smiles and shooting daggers at her new husband, clearly realizing she'd married into the wrong side of the Wilson success story. But the real moment of triumph came during the speeches. As owner of the venue, I had certain privileges like access to the sound system. When James stood up to give his speech, swaying slightly from too much champagne, I nodded to Maria. Before the groom speaks, Maria announced, the owner of Riverside Manor would like to say a few words. The look of panic on James's face was priceless. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and took the microphone. When my brother told me I belonged in the kitchen, I began, my voice clear and calm. He didn't know that I own not just this kitchen but every inch of Riverside Manor. He didn't know that while he was climbing the corporate ladder, I was building an empire. The room was dead silent. I continued, so I'd like to make 2 announcements. First, I'm pleased to share that Riverside Manor is expanding. We're opening 2 new locations next year. I paused, looking directly at James. And second, I'm even more pleased to announce that the kitchen where I supposedly belong? It's being renovated into our new premium bridal suite. Construction begins tomorrow. Sarah's champagne glass crashed to the floor. The kitchen had been their planned preparation area for their day after brunch. Of course, I added sweetly, we'll have to cancel all events during renovations, including tomorrow's brunch. But I'm sure everyone understands that business must come first. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of schadenfreude. My parents tried desperately to backtrack, suddenly remembering all the times they'd supported my dreams. James alternated between attempting to salvage his reputation with his boss and shooting me looks of pure venom. Sarah's family huddled in corners, whispering about how they'd been misled about the Wilson family dynamics. As the night wound down, Richard Hammond handed me his business card. "I'm moving my firm's annual gala to Riverside Manor," he announced loudly. "And I think we need to discuss moving our corporate accounts as well. Clearly, we've been working with the wrong Wilson sibling." James, who had built his entire career on managing those accounts, looked like he might faint. Before leaving, I stopped by the kitchen, my kitchen, where the staff was cleaning up. I helped them pack some leftover wedding cake, remembering all the times I'd been told this was where I belonged. Tomorrow, designers would arrive to begin transforming this space into the most luxurious bridal suite in the state. "Ms. Wilson." Maria appeared beside me. "Your brother's asking about the brunch tomorrow. What should I tell him?" I smiled, thinking about the construction crew already scheduled for 7 a.m. "Tell him what he told me, the kitchen is where he belongs. He can find another venue." As I walked out of Riverside Manor that night, I heard my mother calling after me. "Julia, darling, we need to talk about all this." I kept walking. They'd had 2 years to talk, 2 years to ask what I was doing with my life. Now they could wait another 2 years. There was a waiting list after all. The next morning, as construction crews began tearing down the kitchen walls, I sat in my office reviewing contracts with Richard Hammond's firm. My phone buzzed with messages from family members, ranging from angry to apologetic. I ignored them all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served in the kitchen. It's serving the kitchen itself on a silver platter of success. 6 months after James's wedding, Riverside Manor had undergone more than just a kitchen renovation. The premium bridal suite was a masterpiece of luxury, featured in 3 wedding magazines. My expansion plans were ahead of schedule, with 2 new properties under development. But the real changes were happening in the family dynamics. James's perfect life was unraveling. After Richard Hammond moved the firm's accounts to my management company, James's position as lead corporate counsel became increasingly precarious. His wedding day outburst and subsequent behavior had raised serious doubts about his judgment. One morning, as I sat in my newly renovated office overlooking the manor's gardens, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Mr. James Wilson is here to see you." I looked up from the contracts I was reviewing, ironically, paperwork for acquiring the building that housed James's law firm. "Send him in." James looked different, humbled. His designer suit wasn't quite as crisp, his shoulders not quite as squared. "Julia," he said quietly, "we need to talk." "About what?" I asked, gesturing to a chair. "The bridal suite renovation? I hear Sarah's still upset about the cancelled brunch." He winced. "Sarah's gone. She filed for separation last week. Said she couldn't be married to someone who—" He paused, swallowing hard, "who wasn't even the most successful person in his own family." I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though we both knew I wasn't. "The firm," he continued, "they're reducing my role. Hammond says they need someone more stable to handle the major accounts." He looked up at me, desperation in his eyes. "I need your help, Julia." I studied my brother, the golden child who'd spent years mocking my choices, who'd seated me in the kitchen at his own wedding. "Help with what, exactly?" "Put in a good word with Hammond. Tell him I've changed. Or maybe hire me as your corporate counsel? I know it's a lot to ask." "The kitchen's been renovated," I said quietly, "but I'm sure we could find you a place in maintenance." His face reddened. "Julia, please. I'm your brother." "Funny," I replied, "you didn't remember that when you were making seating arrangements." Just then my assistant buzzed again. "Ms. Wilson, your parents are here." I almost laughed at the timing. "Send them in too. Let's make this a proper family reunion." My parents entered, looking as uncomfortable as James. Mom was clutching her designer handbag like a lifeline. Dad couldn't quite meet my eyes. Julia, sweetheart, Mom started, we've been doing a lot of thinking. About the kitchen? I interrupted sweetly. Dad cleared his throat. About everything. We were wrong. About you, about your choices. About the $7 million venue I own? Or the $3 million in annual revenue? I asked, quoting the numbers I'd thrown at them at the wedding. Actually, I continued, picking up a report from my desk, it's $12 million now after the renovations and expansion. And revenues projected to hit $5 million next quarter. They all stared at me, finally seeing what they'd missed all these years. Success didn't always wear a law firm suit or follow a traditional path. So, I said, folding my hands on my desk, what can I do for my loving family today? The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, standing in my office overlooking the empire I'd built, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's becoming so successful that they have no choice but to come crawling back. But the question remained, would I give them another chance? Or had they permanently lost their seat at my table? As I watched them squirm, waiting for my response, I couldn't help but smile. After all, family gatherings would never be the same again, especially now that I owned all the venues in town.